Good afternoon. It's been a fun day from starting off at Southwestern and not being able to shut off my car and then taking it to the shop. And my husband thought he could fix the Prius and he could not. So then we're back to deciding what do we do with this car. At any rate, another research project. So I want to talk about the assignment that's due on Wednesday. Still a preliminary assignment, but I want to make sure all the pieces are there. And so let's go ahead and talk about those. What's due Wednesday? Write a paragraph that introduces your American Dream focus as well, the problem you're addressing, discusses why it matters, asks research questions, and uses 2 sources to do that. And then you're going to start your annotated bibliography. So, by the way, I think you all know I put some information. I'm moving across the screen. I put some information. I gave you some feedback on the in-class writing that you had. So, we're going to look at a sample that a student wrote this summer. He introduces his American Dream focus as well as the problem he's addressing. He did this in 2 paragraphs, and it's actually, like there's some problems with this draft that he did, but it's pretty good, and he ended up revising it, and it turned out to be the introduction for his essay. So that worked out really well. He needed to discuss why it matters, and then he asked questions. He used 2 sources to do that. So let's take a look at what he wrote. He wrote, when we don't have enough resources, it may be difficult to achieve a goal or a dream. Imagine being a brand new employee and there's plenty of room for advancement. However, you are being limited and barriers are being put up to prevent you from obtaining this goal of yours by people who have been working for the company for a while. Author Lydia Cepeda states about 50% of all agricultural workers are undocumented, while 19% are immigrants authorized to work. Some of these cases are due to the long waiting times to become a United States citizen. There are so many hoops that an immigrant must go through in order to become a citizen. This is the sad truth for immigrants coming to America to obtain the American dream and provide a better life for their families. These immigrants are holding jobs that no American wants to hold, either because they are overqualified or pursuing a dream of their own. There has to be an answer for giving immigrant agriculture workers the same equal opportunity we all have as Americans. In the article, What We Owe America's Farm Workers, the editorial board states, a huge step would be to lift the threat of deportation that looms over many farm workers by passing comprehensive immigration reform that recognizes both the need for labor in the United States and those laborers' rights to opportunity. Sometimes you have to give an inch to gain a mile. In this case, by lowering the standards of the immigration laws, we may see a boost in our agriculture system. Immigrants working harder because they are now successfully Americans will have no worries about the American government deporting them. Now, you can very clearly see the author's topic and his focus, as well as the problem that he's addressing. There are a lot of farm workers who live under threat of deportation, and they're not making enough money. There are some problems in here. We don't know who Lydia Cepeda is. We don't know where the editorial board, like where that article is coming from. There's kind of a mix between legal farm workers and becoming a citizen. However, what I like about this is, by the way, he did change those things. By the time he got to his essay, I don't remember if that was all there in his final draft of his research proposal. But what I like about this draft is that it very clearly identifies his topic. It provides 2 sources that show why it's a problem. It's got some analysis of why it's a problem, and it narrows that focus. It's clear that the author wants to focus on reforming immigration. These are his research questions. And I asked for a major research question. You're like, what was the big one that the whole essay will address? And he chose, how does limiting immigrants affect the US economy and affect the American dream for immigrants? And so that's going to be the whole focus of his essay. And in order to answer that question, he's going to have to know some other things. So those are his secondary questions. What barriers does the US government build that make the journey to the American dream more difficult? Why are those barriers created? How has a tougher US border control prevented immigrants from pursuing the American dream? And how is President Trump trying to make immigration laws better or worse? I don't remember which ones of those he ended up including in his final essay, but I thought this was a good direction. He's looking for very specific immigration. The second part of this draft is to create a minimum of 3 annotated bibliographies. And I said at least one of these must be a new source. Every entry should include a citation. Every entry should include a concise summary of the text. I suggest the précis. And the reason why I suggest the précis is because then you can actually just take that out as you're introducing the source. And so you're doing some work as you develop this annotated bibliography that you can use in your essay. I want you to have some analysis about how this source will help you develop greater understanding of your problem or question. And then I want you to have an evaluation of the strength of the source. Why do this intermediary assignment? Because I want to give you some feedback before you have an assignment that's worth 100 points. So this was one of the sources he had. An article by Caitlin Dickerson and Jennifer Medina, and there's his citation. And he paid great attention to the citation. This is absolutely correct. And you should also pay attention to your citations. This is his concise summary. And you'll see that this is basically the first 3 sentences of the précis. And he's got, here's what the article is about, what the argument is, how Dickerson and Medina develop that argument, and what their purpose is. And then you need to answer the question, how will this source help you develop greater understanding of your problem or question? And he wrote, this article is important to my research because it shows the centrality of the immigrants trying to achieve the American dream. This article also expresses the barriers that immigrants have to overcome so they can achieve the dream for their family. Here's a quote he includes. But 2 weeks into his administration, Trump signed executive orders that have upended the country's immigration laws. The US government is creating barriers for immigrants because they think immigrants are stealing American citizens' jobs. However, no Americans want to work in these conditions because they are overqualified or just working to pursue a dream of their own. Some statistics from researchers at University of California, Davis. Approximately 70% of all farm workers here are living in the United States legally. And he comments, this is a huge number of immigrants working hard to maintain America's agriculture state. If the government deports these hard workers, this will affect our economy overall. And so this is him, this is the author, pulling out the things that he thinks are going to help him answer his questions. The next thing he has to do, and this is the thing that's going to take more time, it's evaluating the strength of the source. Because you want to make sure that you're using credible sources. What makes a credible source? We'll talk about that. because it isn't credible, not credible. It's like, to what degree is it credible? So, authority of the author, what are the author's credentials, and when was the work written? And so this is what he wrote. Caitlin Dickerson is a national immigration reporter for the New York Times, an internationally respected newspaper, so she's familiar with issues related to immigration. Something I like that he did here is that he ties, like, here's who she is, and this is why she's credible. Jennifer Medina is a correspondent located in Los Angeles, so she is familiar with issues in California. They are not experts in their fields, but they report regularly on the issues in the article. And then currency. This article is dated February 2017, so it's fairly recent and addresses issues now facing farmers. What about the scope? Is it clear what topics are being covered, and are they covered in sufficient depth? And what's the purpose of the publication? Is it information, explanation? Is it supported by facts? Is it biased? And the scope is the article covers the financial losses Trump's immigration policies will have on Central California farmers who have a reduced workforce, as well as on business owners in the region who will be losing customers if workers are forced to leave. It also addresses the impact on farm workers and their families. It provides statistics about how much money farmers contribute to the California economy. So that's the scope. What are they covering? What about objectivity? The New York Times is known for its editorial bias against the Trump administration, but this article focuses on data that highlights predictions on how deportation policies will impact the state and the nations. These statistics might be biased, but the authors are interviewing Trump supporters, so they, the people who, like the people who are being interviewed, are not biased against Trump. So, and then you need to evaluate the strength of the source by looking at accuracy. What kind of sources is the author using? And do the facts and conclusions check out with other reputable sources? And this is what the author wrote. The authors interview Trump supporters, 2 farmers, a farm worker. Actually, I don't think the farm worker was a Trump supporter, but 2 farmers and 2 local business people who were Trump supporters. This is based on their opinions and not facts. The authors cited school district administrators who say that the loss of students could harm the school, but they don't name any specific administrators. The authors cite statistics, but do not identify where these statistics come from. They could be verified, and the authors quote the president of the American Federation of Immigration. So that's the review, and here's the analysis. The article seems very objective and data-based because of the use of statistics and interviews, but the interviews are based on opinion rather than fact, and the statistics are not cited. They seem right because everyone knows California agriculture is a big industry, but it's hard to know. The credibility of this article is based primarily on where it was published and the insight it provides into the way some people are viewing issues. And that's all it pretends to do. So, how credible is this? You want to be asking all these questions, and I put this visual here because when you analyze credibility, you aren't saying it's credible or it's not credible. You're saying it has a certain degree of credibility. So for what it is, I think I would put it, like at a 5. There's no reason to doubt these people's opinions, but the statistics would need to be verified. So as you read your sources, ask questions, what kind of data is this? How credible is your source? Who are the authors? When was this published? How credible are the sources the authors name? And any other questions about the type of evidence your sources provide. And, like looking forward to the research paper itself, I want to reference a guy named Tony Ruggiero who wrote about, he asked the question, what constitutes sufficient or enough evidence? He says, it's seldom easy to decide when your evidence or the person whose opinion you're evaluating it is sufficient. In making your determination, you have to consider both the quantity and the quality of the evidence. No simple formula exists, but these general guidelines will help you decide particular cases. So evidence is sufficient or enough when it permits a judgment to be made with certainty. Is it absolutely certain that Trump's policies are going to mess up the California economy based on this evidence? I would say no. If uncertainty is unattainable, evidence is sufficient if one view of the issue has been shown to have the force of probability. Again, I'm going to put that source alone is like a 4 or a 5, on a scale of 10. It's some people's opinion. In all other cases, the evidence must be considered insufficient. So, if that were the only source the author had to build his argument, he wouldn't have enough evidence. But remember, Ruggiero is saying that quantity and quality are important when determining enough evidence. If, for example, the author of the essay in his final draft has not just their opinions, but he has a lot of other evidence that goes with this and confirms the statistics that Dickerson and Medina don't provide, then he might have enough evidence for his argument. So, by Wednesday, you're going to have those 2 paragraphs and an annotated bibliography for 3 sentences, for 3 sources. At least one of these needs to be a new source. Each annotated bibliography entry includes that MLA 8 citation, concise summary of the text, analysis of how it's going to help you approach the problem or question, and evaluation of the strength of the evidence. And that's all I've got. And I'll see you all on Wednesday.